Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's free training Thursday. I have our Abacus Law trainer, Ben Fu, here with me today, and he'll be teaching us perfect case creation. If you have any questions, we will try and get to them at the end. You can type them into the side panel under questions. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Ben Fu.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Amanda. This is Ben Lemos, and I'll be your trainer for the next 30 minutes or so. Okay, today we're going to talk about perfect case creation. In other words, using the intake form. So there's the basic way of entering your names and your contacts, and of course your matters, and then linking them together. And then there's going to be using the intake form, which in my opinion is the most efficient way of creating a case. So some of you already might have had the opportunity to start your matters or create your matters by first going into your matters icon here, then going to the add button and entering the information for that new case that you're about to create, right? Pick a case code, depending on the type of case that you're doing. If you have what we call PALS, Practice Area Legal Solutions, it'll send you to the right matter screen. Or if you don't have any PALS, it'll take you to your standard matter screens, okay? So that is the very basic way of just starting up and creating a case. So you would go in here, you would then probably, let's say it's a divorce case as an example. Once you hit divorce, it'll take you to the divorce matter screen, and you fill out all the pertinent information for that matter screen. Okay. Once you're done, you would hit save, and then you go along and follow that same process. Now you're creating your names, contacts, and you're going through the same process of adding that name. Eventually, after you create your matters, and then you create your matter and your names, say multiple names, and then you want to end up linking those names over to the matter. So you would go into your linked names tab, right? And then come in here into the links name tab, go to your add link, and as you see fit, then you go click on the add link, grab the contact that you just created of that name, and link it over to that particular case or matter. Okay, that is the very basic way of doing it, right? So that could be quite manual at times if you create the matter and you have multiple names that you need to link over, and then you have to create every single name, and then you have to come in here and link every single one of those names to your case. What if I told you that there's obviously one-step process that's going to take care of all of that, right, in one fell swoop, right? So in one, what we call the intake form, and that would be under your intake icon here. Now, of course, depending on your practice areas, you might have already, some of you might have what we call PALs, which are practice area legal solutions, right? Specific to your practices. We have family law intake forms. We have immigration intake forms. Okay, we have personal injury ones, and you can read down the line the many ones that we offer. Now, these intake forms that are specific to these practice areas come along with our practice area legal solutions that you might purchase as a package. Okay, along with those PALs also come specific name screens and specific matter screens, specific again with those practice areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a regular intake form, which comes out of the box with everyone for everyone that has purchased initially your AbacusLaw. Okay, and these PALs that I'm referring to on these other intake forms come with the specific PALs if you were ever interested in purchasing those PALs. So in the new case, okay, you're going to have a very simple new case intake form here that has a client plaintiff. As far as the main information and the components that make up the intake form is going to be the same. You have your matter information to be entered, or case to be entered here at the top. You'll have your client information that you can enter here as creating a name record. So you'll be creating the matter at the top, creating the name within here. And then what the form does is automatically creates a link type for you. So that takes away that extra step that you would have to do if you were doing it the basic way, right? Here, as you create the matter record, and as you create the name record, it also creates a link for you of whatever you're entering in this section. So in this case, it will be the client. But the form knows to also create other link types. So if it's a client in this particular case, let's say it'll create a plaintiff link as well. And if you're using the intake form, it's ultimately because you want to end up billing the client. So it'll create also what we call a bill to link. Okay, that means then that this particular case or matter will exist in billing and accounting, and then you'll be able to bill out of it. Because that bill to link, if you didn't do it through the intake form, you physically would have to add it just like you added any other regular link types here. Okay, so right off the bat, the intake form not only is allowing you or assisting you in creating the matter records, the name records, but also all the linking. And also from the actual intake form, you do have the ability to go and use the existing names database or the existing matter database in the event that you all had already entered that into your system. So it comes obviously with those particularities, which obviously at the end of the day is going to be very efficient because it's going to save you time. Okay. As well as not you're only creating another link type like this one that the client is going to be created, again, the plaintiff, the bill to. Then there's also the opposing party link that will be created if you decide to enter that information in this section. So some of you might say, well, what if we only have the client and we yet don't have the opposing party? Well, you don't necessarily need to fill everything out within the intake form to create that case. As long as you have at least, a minimal amount of information, in other words, the matter information, at least the client information, the intake form can get generated. As it gets generated, when you hit create records and close, then you can always edit those matter screens and those name screens, right? As long as they're within the lifespan of that particular case or matter that exists. So those are really the main important points when it comes to the very simple kind of cases in this case. But if you were to then go to a specific type of intake form, for those of you that may have, let's say, a family law type of practice of a firm, but haven't purchased the family PALs, let me just show you how these intake forms can assist you. So there would be an intake form for not only the divorce cases, custody, adoption, right? Domestic violence, guardianship, paternity. So the same concept applies for every other practice. Just to give you an example, how different a divorce case might look compared to that standard new case intake form. And it's more specific, obviously, towards that practice area. So the information that you're filling out here would be specific to that, obviously, a divorce case, right? You fill out the information here. Then, of course, the first name that comes to mind will be the client. But this client might then create also what we call other links, such as the bill to as well. And then you have the information of the opposing party or spouse, and that link will be created. And of course, the opposing counsel. So you get the idea. The specific practice areas will have more of these link types that you can generate right off the bat from the intake form. What you will also notice in every single one of these intake forms is the section here where it says select the WHO code for calendar events. And then you're going to see responsible attorney. So instead of seeing responsible attorney, just think of this as more of a firm member kind of a field where you can include any members of your firm that you want to be notified in their calendars of reminders of what to proceed with regards to the intake process of that particular case or matter. Okay, the intake form is going to be that initial step that you're going to put the basic information in. But then after that, there's going to be subsequent action items that you probably want to handle within that particular intake for that case, right? So we consider part of the intake process. So think of maybe a rule, right? And think of a rule as a series of events within a timeline that are related with one another, all right? That can be automatically calendared the minute you use this intake form. So just to give you a very general example, think of this as, let's say that you're using you're going to have a meeting with a client for the first time, that you're going to open up a billing account, that you're going to have a confirmation letter to be written up. But that confirmation letter, you might write it up 7 days later. And then there's a draft fee contract. That draft fee contract might have to be 14 days later. Okay. So all of that, you can always have that pre-generated, pre-configured within your intake form. Okay, so the idea is that, and I'm going to show you shortly, you can do that you can have this rule embedded within each one of these intake forms, depending on which specific practices you're doing. So at the end of the day, not only are you creating the matter record here with all the most information that you can, the client information as far as the names, that who's going to be the client, the plaintiff, or the bill to, right? Also, as well, all the other parties that you're linking over, plus everything that needs to be calendared as subsequent action items that needs to be handled by your staff, right? And by whom within your staff? Maybe the attorney needs to be involved. Maybe the billing person needs to be involved. The legal assistant or the secretary. All those four individuals, you can list them here. And as far as the actual rule that's embedded within the intake form, then they'll all get reminders on their calendar, okay, in those specific dates as you formulate that particular rule within each or specific intake form that you please or specific practice area. So let me show you what I mean by a rule that can be created. If I go into my file, setup, and I go to my rules, I'm going to pick the very basic one example that I'm referring to as the new case. So when it comes to your new cases, and I want to edit that just to show you what makes up that new case rule. This new case rule is already embedded within the basic intake form that we have that comes with the system, right? That's already there. And this is just as a sample so you understand how to build these particular new case rules. So in this one, we already have meet, right? First meeting with a client, right? So that same day that you're opening up that intake form, that same day it says 0, then that same day it'll be calendared under those individuals that you put on the who as where said responsible attorney, but more actually you could just think of the staff members. They will all the individuals that you mark there will get their in their calendar as reminders. So that same day, the opening billing of the person that um, you're going to have calendar open billing account for those individuals that you entered in there as well. One day later, someone's going to do the conflict of interest check. This is, of course, based on the sample that we're providing. Let's say you do the conflict interest check before that, you don't need to have it in there, right? Of course, you open the file. In other words, maybe complete the file as to the information that you have within that case. And then you're going to have the confirmation letter 7 days later, and then maybe the draft fee contracts 14 days later. But in this case, it's 14 days later, let's say after event number 5 happens. And event number 5 is 7 days later. So technically 21 days after the fact. This particular rule, as I said, is the one that comes with, or similar to this, you can make modifications to it. And at any given point, after you make the modifications to it, then you can attach it to specific intake forms. So let me just, in this particular case, I'm not going to walk you through how to make the changes, but think of that. Think of all the changes that you can muster into one. So let's say you don't want 7 days on the confirmation letter. You want to do it 5 days prior, and you wanted to make that adjustment. You can on the rule. So just for argument's sake, whenever you want to modify a particular rule, what we normally have you do or suggest is, instead of just editing the original, okay, instead of just going to the edit, we want to clone it. So when you're cloning the original, let's say you want to call this rule, and of course, as a firm, you can call it whatever you please. Let's say we call this Amanda, right? So the new rule is going to be called Amanda, and I am cloning it. Oh, there's someone called Amanda already, so I guess that's not a good one. Let's say Amy. So I'm going to use the new Amy, and I'm going to call it Amy's new rule. So when you put Amy's new rule, and of course, you got to be a little bit more precise there. So when I go Amy's new rule, then it brings me up to that rule and to that event. Now I can make changes to it. We recommend cloning. Why? Because when we do updates or upgrades, you can lose out on those if you do the upgrades and upgrades. So we always want to clone it. It's almost like a save as. So that way you keep your own, it's unique to you, and you always have that, right? So you don't have so it doesn't get overwritten, okay? So when I come back here, I'm gonna go in, and let's say I wanted to make a change just to the 7-day interval. So I can simply go in, instead of having 7, I would put 5, and just like that, now that new rule is 5 days. So the confirmation, instead of being written 7 days out, it can be 5 days out. Okay. By the same token, you can make more. You can make more changes to that, as into the who code here, which means that if you always have the same person writing up the confirmation letter, you can have that person be designated automatically to be the one that's going to overwrite, regardless of who you've entered in as the rest of the team to be notified on that. So in their calendar, instead of the rest of the team, then it'll overwrite to one specific person. Okay. And as far as showing up as reminders, as opposed to things to do, every single one of these events within rules are always going to show up reminders unless you changed it. So if you go back in and you go into your event details under the time section, you see how it's empty? That means it's because they're all defaulted to being a reminder in your calendars. So what you want to ultimately do, instead of being a reminder, you want to make it a to-do, because there is a difference between your to-dos and your reminders, okay? Remember that a lot of the times, reminders are not going to roll over to the next day. And most folks like to have that maybe then as a to-do, because if they don't get it done on that particular day, it'll roll over to the next day. So I can have that. Now I can see exactly of those modifications that I've made. And you can always use these rules, right, to be embedded to any specific intake form that you would like. So I just created one for Amy. So I saved that, I hit done. Now, if I wanted to go back to my intake form manager, okay, this is where I'm going to make the change of using a specific rule as opposed to the one that's always there that's going to be new case. So if I wanted to make those changes, I would then pick, let's say, the one that we were referring to, right, was the new case intake form as a plaintiff, the general one. I would then edit that and go into my record section, and under my events tab, I'm going to change it. But let me just break this down a little bit for you further. You saw when we were looking at that intake form, and I told you that the names, the first name that I was entering in there was creating automatically a link, right, to my matter as a build to, as a client, as a plaintiff. This is where you can actually make those changes as well. If you didn't want it to put in a plaintiff in there, just client and build to, well, you can always highlight this, edit properties, right? Then go to the link type, and then you can then say, okay, build to I like, right? And I like a client, but I don't like, you leave the client one, and but you can take away the one for plaintiff. It's all the way at the bottom here. And then you would uncheck it because they're all checked as of right now. So it's automatically creating those link types, right? When you're doing your case creations. So this is how much modifications you can do to any given intake form, from the links that you can have done to the events and the rules. In other words, because under my event is where I'm going to actually modify my rule that I am embedding within that intake form. So if I go edit properties, you'll notice right off the bat here that you're going to have who, what, when. When it comes to my rules, your rules are always going to be in your when, of course, sorry, in your what. And then you go edit the field, and you'll see right away that says new case. Okay, the one that I just created was Amy. So if you want to just use Amy as your default value as a case to be embedded within that, the intake form that I just have highlighted, which is your standard one, I would then put the Amy, and then it'll always know to use Amy as the new rule to be embedded with that the intake form that I just chose. So as you know, as far as a powerful tool, you can then make this your own and have different workflows, I like to call workflows, or intake processes for any given intake form that you are creating at any given time. So if you have different practice areas, you can imagine how powerful that can be, right? You can have a whole workflow from the initial intake process for just your personal injuries versus your family versus your divorce cases versus your immigration, estate planning, you name it. Okay, and that, as far as the way of using this, intake form as not only a easy way to quick way to create it, you can also be very flexible in how specific you want those intake forms to assist you with calendaring, as well, of course, as creating the matters, the names, and all the linking. All right, I'm going to open it up to questions right now, so you can guys go ahead. If you have any questions, please fire away. So the first question I have is, how is it that you add a linked matter consistently each and every time because ours differs from day to day. Okay. As far as the matters are concerned, are you creating them through your intake form? Are you talking about different practices? Um, I'm not sure I'm quite understanding the question. You do not yet use intake forms. Well, if you don't use intake forms, then what you're having is just your basic standard. I should say not standard, but your basic way of adding the matters. You go out to your matters first, right? You want to add your matter. Once you add that matter, it probably looks like this. And correct me if I'm wrong. You have your user preferences, and if you don't have pals that you've purchased, for example, whenever you're adding your matters, your standard matter screens are going to look pretty basic. And then we have multiple cases that we add underneath. Now, so Abacus works. The question says, that we set up an initial client standard, and then we have multiple cases that we add underneath. Okay, so the way you should have it done, yes, you can create that client, but then you're going to have to create every case to then be linked to that client. So everything in Abacus for the most part is matter centric. So the cases or matters need to be created and then link them over to the client that you might have. So after the matter is being created and then the name is already in place, it's all a matter of going back to the matter that you just created, okay, and linking it to a specific client. I always have my clients already because I've already established that, but you would then go back to your database, add link, and grab the same client. So one client can have multiple cases or matters linked to it. Next question I see is we set up, sorry, can you go over the rules part again? I think I missed something there. Okay. Um, yeah, so as far as the rules are concerned, okay, you go over to file, setup, and then you're going to go into rules. Okay. The very example that I was showing as is the very basic new case. This comes with your program out of the box. And what I was basically trying to cover in reference to the attributes or the characteristics is that you're always going to have a series of events under that particular rule, right? In other words, multiple events that are related to one another, of course, and within a timeline. So when you see the actual what, that is just how it's being called, but this is the actual description that you'll be able to see in your calendars, right? And then of course the interval. So 0 days, as if you were to use this particular intake rule within an intake form, is that same day that you use the intake form, you're also going to have calendared someone to meet with a client for the first time. And of course, in the section that I showed you, all the who's will show up as far as the individuals that you chose, as far as the attorneys, legal assistants, paralegals, so forth and on, they're going to be, it's going to reflect it on their calendars as reminders. Okay. These other one, the open up the billing account that same day also on the reminder section under in a particular calendar, they will be able to see that as well. Open up the billing account, whomever you chose in that through the intake form. And then of course this one means 1 day later in your calendar, right? The next day you will have these show up as reminders. And then 7 days later you have the confirmation letter as a description show up in the reminder section for those individuals that you entered in that intake form, okay, as far as your staff members are concerned. So I hope that answers your question. You can actually have one event be triggered by another one. In other words, if you say 14 days later after the fifth event, right, and then you end up editing this when it's already placed in your particular case, and you end up editing the actual date of what the fifth event falls on, right? Let's say you moved it up 2 days, then this day will be triggered and will require an update. So you will get prompted right away, right? Whether you want to update any related events. And since this event, number 6, is related to event number 5 because it's triggered by the relativity, then it'll ask you and prompt you that. Okay. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Can what was it? Paul Smith created in standard. Then we have Smith versus Smith. Then we have a second case versus Jones. Okay, that was Elizabeth Hodges with reference to the first question. Again, it's just a matter of making sure that you're linking the correct uh, name of your client to the different cases. So yes, you would have to create Smith versus Smith, then Smith versus Jones, but you're linking them all to Paul Smith as your client. Okay. The next question is from Naisha. She says, you mentioned that it's better to clone in the rules and events. What is the difference if you just add it? Um, well, you can add a new one altogether. You can create your new one. What I was referring to is just using one as a foundation and doing almost like a save as, and then from that one, creating your own. You want to start one from scratch, you can go ahead and do that as well. Okay, you do have the option to go hit add and start your own rule as well. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the meantime. If you do have questions, please type them in. Is there a practice mode for the program? I am very new to Abacus and I feel like repetitive use of the different features is the best way to really acquaint myself with the different features. As far as practice modes, we don't have that per se, but we do offer training videos and within our abacusnext.com. So there's plenty of training videos there with regard to go abacusnext.com, and you're going to do /support/training. So there are videos there that you can see, and then that you can use those videos as to ignite you to practice on your own within your own system. Yes, this video will be available for you later. As a matter of fact, we have a link to where we have either upcoming webinars with any specific of our products, in this case, Abacus Law, and we have those recordings as well of every single one that we've done in the past. So that link actually is abacusnext.com, and it'll be /webinars. If you have more questions, please type them up.
All right, it doesn't look like we have anything else coming in. Thank you to, I stand corrected. Do you have any advice for new users as far as learning that's where it cuts off, learning the program quickly?
Well, yes. I mean, if I can, or if I may reiterate, yes, in abacus.com, we have certain links, not only the one I just mentioned to the videos as well as the webinars. Those are always very helpful. But there's also one we called Knowledge Base, which pretty much you can ask away as far as the most commonly asked questions that our clients have had. We've had articles attached to those questions, and we created a platform where you can use keywords and whatnot to try to get as acclimated as possible with not only content but troubleshooting efforts. So those three links right then and there are the ones that we currently recommend for to start up and get used to the system and just get more acclimated. Can you show me where matter maintenance is located? Sure. Matter maintenance is actually part of billing. So it would be in our billing module. Okay, so you can double click through your billing module. And this is a good question because what the intake form can propel you to do is that once you have assigned that open billing account feature within, let's say, the bill to, and the billing person needs to be aware that they need to open up that particular case or matter. In other words, the matter maintenance portion of it in billing and accounting, they can then go in and put the general information for that client. So what do I mean exactly? Well, what I'm referring to, um, the latest information when it comes to how am I billing this client, right? Is it hourly? Is it flat fee? Is it on a contingency basis? If I am billing hourly, am I billing at standard rate, right? All that information is what we consider matter maintenance. So you go to matters, right? Then you can go within the matter that you're trying to choose. And after you do that, this is what we call the matter maintenance window, modifying the existing matter. So this is obviously a little bit off topic, but since you asked the way, I'm going to give you the answer. And these are usually covered, this type of information, and or as far as trainings are concerned, is what we call our billing onboarding training, right? And that obviously has to do anything related with the client. So in here, then you would go into billing, change the different formatting that needs to be, the rates, the address, fee sharing, payment schedule, all that good stuff. But that is, I would say, the second part of, if anything, as setting or setting up a matter or creating a matter, because ultimately you want to also bill it, right? If that's your goal. So the matter maintenance is handled in the billing portion or billing and accounting portion of the software, as opposed to the intake form. How much is it to purchase the PAL? Well, those are, I believe, don't want to be quoted 100%, but I believe they're $20 a month. And that depends on the practice area that you would prefer, of course. And you can have, and then it'll be available for all your users. So if you practice immigration and family law and state planning and personal injury, well, then obviously each one will cost you $20 a month going forward. And the reason why it's $20 a month is because we make updates to them, and and if ever required an update, you don't have to worry about purchasing. It's just ongoing as far as the $20 that you would like to have purchased. And it's $20 a month for the entire firm, of course, not per person. Okay.
All right, that is all the time we have today. Thank you to Ben Fu, and thank you to everyone for listening. As a reminder, this will be available on our website at abacusnext.com/webinars, and it will also be on our blog at abacusnext.com/blog. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly at webinars@abacusnext.com. Thank you to everybody for listening, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.